question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you. Let me talk to you.
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is a Monday night. We are rolling on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter /X, Facebook, and Twitch. It is episode 88 of the Throwdown with Matt, and tonight is a special episode. We are throwing down with Marek Brave. Marek is the head trainer at Black and Brave Wrestling Academy in Davenport, Iowa. And welcome aboard, Marek. How you doing
Hello,
tonight,
hello. Thanks for having me on tonight. That was quite the introduction. I like the video production and all of that as well.
Well, thank you. You know, it's been a work in progress. Doing this live streaming, I have learned how to do all kinds of things that I didn't know how to do before. So, you know, it's all a good thing. And like I said, you know, this episode is actually pretty much 6 months in the making because, you know, early on in doing these, really going all the way back to episode 22, I had Utah-based wrestler and promoter Trey Matthews on. And during the course of our chat, you know, he was mentioning that virtually right after our session, he was going to be leaving to go to Davenport to train at Black and Brave. And, you know, being a long-term fan, I was very familiar with what Black and Brave was. And I was definitely intrigued when he said that. So after we got off the air, I asked him if he would be down to do a follow-up episode when he got back, and he was. And, you know, it just kind of went from there. We did the follow-up, and he talked about what a simultaneously grueling but wonderful experience he had training with you guys. And about then was when I got the idea to, you know, reach out to you. And we kind of got it scheduled, but we had to sort of schedule it further down the road a bit. And, you know, recently I was actually able to have two of Trey's classmates, Tori Fox and Drake Holloway on. And again, they all sing the praises of Black and Brave. And, you know, having interacted now with some of your graduates, the way they conduct themselves, how well-spoken they are, and the passion that they have for the business, you guys have a lot to be proud of.
All right, well, thank you very much for saying all that. I mean, that's what we aim for. I really liked that Trey said it was both grueling and fun at the same time. That's what we aim for. That's what it should be, right? It shouldn't be
absolutely
a walk in the park. It shouldn't be, you know, a cupcake type of facility. You know, you're going to work hard when you're there. We're gonna push you to your limits. We want to test you physically. We want to test you mentally. We want to make sure that you are getting an accurate representation of what the professional wrestling business is going to present to you upon graduation. Because if you think training's tough, when you get out there in the independent world, it only does get tougher.
Absolutely. And I liked the Black and Brave trailer on YouTube where you basically don't mince any words. We want you to quit. you
And
know?
not necessarily that, right?
Right,
I,
right.
I, I, I
mean,
would love.
I understood what you meant,
Sure. I would love if everyone who came through the doors on day one made it to the end. That's just not the reality of the situation, though. I would
Right,
say we have about a 50% graduation rate. Some people just don't really understand how difficult the professional wrestling business can be. It is
right.
very physically taxing. It's not a normal thing for a human body to go from a standing position all the way down to a falling position at a high rate of speed. That's just not normal. That's not what we were
No.
made to do. So a lot of times people, I think, because maybe they didn't do athletics in high school and they go, well, wrestling isn't necessarily real, right? It's not a real sport. It's not a real athletic endeavor. And then they come to the gym and they realize, au contraire, it actually is pretty quite physically demanding, despite the fact that maybe the finishes are predetermined. I don't think I'm breaking any news to
No,
anyone
not at
listening to
all. I
this
mean,
now, but yeah,
yeah,
it does require a lot of physicality, and those who are not prepared for that physicality sometimes find it to be a bit jarring and do end up deciding to go home. I wish they would stay. I wish they'd stick around and kind of test themselves and push themselves beyond their limits. But it's the wrestling business. It's not for everybody. But if it's for you, I think Black and Brave Wrestling Academy is a good spot for you.
absolutely. So, how long have you been involved in the wrestling business yourself?
I actually had my first match on August 30th, 2003. So we're coming up on 22 years this year.
Wow. Wow. So who actually trained you?
So I was trained by Danny Daniels. He owns AAW in Chicago, one of the top independent promotions in the country right now. But myself and Seth Rollins, we trained at the same time. We went there right after we graduated high school. We actually wrestled prior to being fully trained by Danny Daniels. We were doing day camps and things like that with other professionals when we started wrestling on independent shows, and we did that through our entire senior year of high school before.
Mhm.
Upon graduation of high school, we went to Chicago and got trained by one Danny Daniels.
Very cool. Yeah, you know, I just think it is neat that you have known Seth since you were both teenagers, and you've kept that friendship and that brotherhood, and because I mean, in the world we live in, sometimes that's hard to do. But
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, but yeah, the fact that you guys have stuck together this long, and you've managed to have a business together is really neat.
Yeah, and we're friends. On one hand, we're friends, and then on the other hand, like you mentioned, we're business partners. So um, the friendship part is easy. We've been friends since we were
Right,
16 years old. We both turned 39 this year. That doesn't feel real. Just the fact that we've been doing it as long as we've been doing it. But when it comes to business, we keep that relationship strong as well because we understand you can't bring friendship feelings into business. When business needs to
right.
be conducted, you got to conduct it like businessmen, and we're able to separate the two worlds there.
Absolutely. But yeah, I know what you mean. I've been a fan, varying levels of fandom at different points in my life, but I've been a fan since I was around 11, and I just turned 55 back in the fall. So I was a kid in Florida watching Florida Championship Wrestling at the time with Gordon Soley doing commentary, and my first feud that I remember was Dusty Rhodes and Kevin Sullivan.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And having followed this stuff for 40 plus years, man, I've seen a lot. and and I've got to say right now is actually one of the most exciting times to be a fan. There's just so much content. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, every day of the week, you got a new program you can watch, and I don't think the business has ever been as popular as it is now, globally,
Right.
worldwide. It's a great time to be a fan. It's a great time to be a wrestler. And for myself, it's a great time to be a wrestling trainer.
Gotcha. So, um, at what point did you and Seth come up with the concept of a school?
So actually, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, I was actually running a couple classes on my own prior to Seth getting involved here locally, here in Davenport, Iowa, with some local guys that just kind of wanted to give it a shot and see if they could hang and break into the independent business. So I was doing a couple classes on my own while Seth was down in Florida in NXT, and he
Mhm.
would check in with me and, hey, how are things going? How's the class going? How are the students? And I had a couple of really good students in there, but for the most part, it was a struggle. It was difficult. I was finding it difficult to deal with a younger generation of performer. And I mean, we're talking 12 years ago at this point. So
Yeah.
I was even younger, much younger than I am now. But even then, there was the age gap was a bit to navigate, in terms of how those individuals conducted themselves compared to when Seth and I had broken in prior to that, 10 years prior to that. And so he would check in with me, and I would, kind of almost vent a little bit and express my frustrations. And he said, well, you know what? I'll tell you what, when I get called up to the main roster, how would you feel about starting a school with me? And I was like, hey, yeah, we've always been great business partners when we were a tag team together on the independent scene,
Mhm.
um, not thinking that it would actually happen, figuring it was probably one of those things that people talk about and then
Right.
they never actually follow through on. But, sure enough, he gets called up to the main roster. He debuts with the Shield, and then he's
Mhm.
texting me. He's like, "All right, I'm on the main roster. Give me a few months to acclimate myself, and we're gonna get this Black and Brave thing going." So fast forward a few months, we start having business meetings. He moves back to Iowa. He's no longer living in Florida. We start having business meetings, and we start partnering with local facilities, and then it's like, hey, I think we should announce this. And when we do, WWE, they covered it on their website, WWE.com, and we were able to fill up our first class within a week, and it just kind of spiraled from there.
And now it's a 2-year waiting list. I
It
mean,
really is.
yeah,
It really is.
it's a nice problem to have.
I agree. In fact, we just announced our 2027 applications today, so we're starting to fill up
I actually
2027.
reposted that earlier
Oh, awesome.
today because yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sure, sure. So I'm I'm presuming by what you have said that you've been at least a fan of this stuff the huge majority of your life.
Oh, yeah,
Wh-
I would
What
say,
what what
since
is
I
your
was 6 years
earliest
old.
wrestling related memory?
That's kind of funny because I became a fan, when I was 6 years old, or actually 5 years old in 1991, but prior to that, I remember my mom turning on wrestling at one point when I was real young, maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, and, seeing Jake the Snake Roberts on TV, seeing Hulk Hogan on TV, and not being a fan of wrestling, I didn't quite understand what was going on. But the reason I remember it, and this is a silly story, is I had a pencil and I stuck the eraser end of the pencil in my ear and was just kind of twirling it around a little bit. And then I ended up sticking it in too far. And obviously, you feel pain when you do that. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if it was the pain or the excitement of what I was watching on TV, but that memory really sticks in my head all these years later. But that was my earliest wrestling related memory, but I didn't really become a fan until a couple of years later, like I said, in 1991.
Got you. Got you. So I know that aside from Black and Brave and the writing and podcasting that you're doing relating to the Miami Dolphins, you also are running SCW. Um,
Yeah.
Tell us about that. How did that come about?
Well, I did not actually start SCW, and we actually call ourselves SCW Pro now, just to kind of differentiate from the original group. But SCW Pro, SCW was the first company that I ever wrestled for, Seth as well, in August of 2003 on the company's first official event. Prior to that, it was essentially a backyard wrestling promotion that took place in Iowa fashion out of a barn. And the ring posts were actually the pillars of the barn, the
Oh,
supports
that's
holding the
cool.
barn up. And it was real turnbuckles that were screwed into those, and then real rope that was fastened to that. And I think the mat was made out of mattresses covered in sheet metal, covered in wrestling mats, like high school wrestling mats.
Oh, wow.
And I started going to those events as a fan when I was 16 years old, and I think it was like $2 to get in. You had to climb a ladder to the second level of this barn just to watch, and I was like, man, this is really cool. And then they used to invite people into the ring afterwards
Mhm.
to I don't know, just roll around, I guess. And I remember I went with my friend from high school. His name was Keith, and he did a front flip, and I did a back flip, and they were like, "You guys are in. You're in. You're a part of this organization now." And then we got kicked out of the barn by the kid's dad because he was afraid it was going to collapse under the weight of the amount of fans that were there. I mean, like, you could put 100 people in there to watch these little backyard wrestling shows. And so after we
Oh,
got
yeah.
kicked out of the barn, it was like, well, what are we going to do now? And the next thing was, well, let's pool our money together and buy a ring and then just put on shows inside local gymnasiums and bingo halls and invite people out to come see us there. And so that's what we did. And after doing that for a number of years, and obviously going away to get trained and become actual professional wrestlers at that point, the company was doing fine, but the people who were running it at the time didn't want to do it anymore. And so it was like, well,
Mhm.
somebody needs to take it over or it's going to shut down. And I volunteered to take it over, and that was in, oh, I would say 2009. So 6 years after I began wrestling, I took over the organization, and I've been promoting wrestling shows ever since.
That is awesome. So, um, I know that you're based in Davenport, Iowa.
Yep.
What is your favorite thing about Davenport?
I really like. I always tell people that maybe it isn't the most fun place to visit, but it's a great place to live. You know, it's big enough that whatever you want to do, you can do in Davenport. If you want to go out to the bars and the clubs and go dancing, you can absolutely do that. If you want to go bowling or go see movies, that's all here. You know, there's a myriad of restaurants of every different type of cuisine you could ever want. We have minor league baseball and minor league hockey and minor league arena football. So you can go to live sporting events. But it's small enough that you're not dealing with the big city traffic, and the crime is pretty minimal. And so I always tell people, when you're visiting, maybe you're not going to have the best time in the world, you know, as compared to if you're going to Miami or if you're going to Los Angeles or New York. But if you're living here and you're looking for a well-rounded experience while still having a little bit of that small town feel, Davenport and the Quad Cities as a whole is a great place for you.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I'm about 35 miles northeast of Atlanta. And where we are, we're right kind of on the line where suburbia starts to meet rural. And it's nice because, you know, we've got a big city nearby if we want the amenities of a big city, but we're far enough out that we're sort of, you know, crime isn't bad, and you know, we're away from a lot of the hustle and bustle, but it's nearby if we want it.
Yeah,
So
very
yeah,
very similar to us. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, something else I've noticed, you know, doing the Merrick Brave deep dive, is you were on the first season of Night Fight
Yeah.
on the History Channel.
Yeah.
I remember actually watching that years ago. You know, and it's sort of funny how that's come full circle. How did that whole thing come about? And is medieval history and weaponry something you dig?
I wouldn't say medieval history or weaponry is something that I'm super into, but I do love history. I love to study different wars that have happened, throughout recorded human history and whatnot. I'm a avid watcher of the History Channel, but to tell you the truth, they just reached out to me. They sent me a DM over Instagram and asked me if I had ever watched armored combat fighting, and I hadn't. And so they sent me a link, and I watched a YouTube video, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And they were like, "Well, how would you like to participate in a TV show based around this?" And it sounded a little crazy. Don't get me wrong. Not something I've never taken an axe, or up until that point, I had never taken an axe and hit a human being with it. Um, and so didn't sound like the best way to spend my Saturday. But I was interested, and they
Yeah.
kind of laid it out for me, and I went through a casting process with a couple Hollywood agents and whatnot, and they thought with my professional wrestling background that I would be perfect for the show. So I flew out to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and they fitted me for my suit of armor the day before filming. And then that night we went to a production meeting. And in that production meeting, I learned that of the 6 contestants on this reality show, because it was all real, it wasn't like wrestling, it wasn't scripted. We actually had to sign game show waivers that said that if we tried to script it in any way, we could face jail time, which I didn't know that was a thing, but
Wow.
it is. And I found out that night at the production meeting that I was the only rookie on my episode. Of the 6 people, 5 of them were actually professional armored combat fighters that participated in a traveling league. And some of them had been doing it upwards of 20 years. And I was
Wow.
going to have my first fight the following morning with these veterans. I always equate it to somebody never playing a down of football in their life, getting a 30-minute crash course where they get to throw a football around. For me, it was you get to swing a sword and an axe. And how does that feel? All right, you're good. Never playing a down of football in your life, and then the very next day being thrown into the Super Bowl and asked to hang with these pros. So that's what I was asked to do. Needless to say, I got my butt kicked. I really did. They whooped up on me, but I got a couple licks in as well. And like I said, I ended up bringing a medieval axe over my head and hitting another human being in the back of his skull. He was wearing a helmet, thankfully, one of a medieval, armored helmet,
Yeah.
and he went crashing to the floor. And I was like, that is by far the craziest thing I've ever done. And at that point, I had been a professional wrestler for 15 years. So,
But you know what? What an interesting experience, though. Just to have in your memories. I mean, that's
oh yeah.
pretty neat. That
It
is
was really
pretty neat.
fun, and I would absolutely do it again if there was ever a second season. If I was invited, I would 100% do it again. It was fun to step outside my comfort zone, try something I had never done before, and it really kind of reminded me almost of high school athletics. Where you're going
Mhm.
out there, you're competing for real. There's a winner, there's a loser, and it was a good time. Definitely would do it again.
For sure. So, they say that the best wrestling personas are essentially yourself turned up to 11. So kind of tell me about in-ring Merrick Brave and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
Sure. I mean, there's been different iterations of Merrick Brave throughout the years. I started out as essentially just me, just a young kid trying to have fun, trying to be a goof every now and again, just trying to have a good time with my buddies and go out there and put on a show for the people. But as I got older, I realized I kind of wanted to have a gimmick. I wanted a character. And so I developed this character called the Fashionista. May I tell you, this character predates Seth Rollins wearing those outlandish costumes by many, many, many years. So that was
Really?
me. That was me. I
Ah,
did that myself. I was wearing these crazy outfits. I wasn't doing traditional wrestling gear, no tights. It was all, these big furry coats and these ornately printed designer jeans that I would wrestle in. They were very stretchy, so I was allowed to, or I was afforded the opportunity to still be very flexible in them. crazy sunglasses, and I had a little bit longer hair. It was all braided and whatnot. But just going out there as this essentially like a fashion designer character, as a heel, trying to get as much heat as possible. In these Midwest towns, in front of these farmers that look at somebody like that and they go, I don't like that guy. He doesn't look like me. He doesn't act like me. That was probably my favorite character that I ever did, and that character was actually the inspiration for that character were these lead singers of these rock and roll bands, bands that I didn't particularly like. And I would watch interviews of these guys and I'd be like, oh man, this guy's kind of a jerk. Like he's very full of himself. And then kind of a light bulb went off and I was like, oh, that's a perfect wrestling character, like somebody like that who dresses like a fool and is insanely cocky and full of himself and thinks he's almost a god to his audience, and so I started playing with that, and it evolved throughout the years, and it was a really fun character. It was a really good time, and unfortunately, it was cut short due to the neck injury that I had actually suffered many years prior to doing the character, but it had gotten so bad at one point that I needed to go in for spinal fusion surgery. So I think I still had a few more years with that character, and unfortunately wasn't able to flesh those out.
Gotcha. So, at least in some small part, is what Seth is doing now with the outlandish costumes sort of a partial tribute to the fashionista?
It's not a conversation we've ever had, but there are definitely elements of it to that. And he would watch me, even while in WWE, he'd be back in Iowa. He'd have a free weekend, and he'd come to an SCW show, and he would watch me do the character, and he was always very, very impressed and interested by the character. So even if it influenced him subconsciously, I do think there was a bit of an influence there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I always love his costumes, and I'm always curious week to week, what is he going to come out wearing?
That's pro wrestling, right? That's
absolutely.
Macho Man Randy Savage with that with the hat and the tassels and all of that. That's pro wrestling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of, I guess both, from your in-ring days and now as a trainer, what is your biggest in-ring pet peeve?
Oh gosh, when I had longer hair, and I used to have hair down to my sternum here, I hated when people would grab me by my hair and pick me up by my hair. I'm like, hey man, it's a work. You know what I mean? You don't need to pull my hair. You're gonna pull it out. So I hated when people did that. Obviously, when I cut my hair, that wasn't as big of an issue. But I think my biggest pet peeve would be when people don't remember that it's a work and they want to be a little rough with you inside the ring. If I'm a little bit from the old school generation, right? I've been doing it for 22 years, so I do understand if I'm in the ring with a veteran and I'm screwing up, if that guy wants to lay it in a little bit to remind me where I'm at and remind me that we could take it there if we want to take it there, then I fully understand that. But if you just start the match with laying it in and busting me in my jaw and busting my eyebrow open, then that's not, I'm not trying to do that. This isn't Night Fight. This is professional wrestling here. We all want to wake up the next day feeling right as rain. I want to be able to take my kids to the farmer's market and have a good morning. I don't want to be at the doctor's office getting my eyebrows sewn up,
Exactly. So, and again, I'm sort of reworking a question that I ask a lot of my guests, to sort of bring it to your perspective. And that is, I know that there's kind of 2.5 ways of more or less preparing for a match, either working it out with your opponent in the back, calling it in the ring, or kind of doing a hybrid.
Yeah.
As a trainer, what do you emphasize most to your trainees?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, you got to be able to do both. You really do. Calling it in the back in today's day and age, with the way that wrestling has evolved into a lot more of a quicker pace, right? There's a lot more going on. There's a lot of action in a professional wrestling match in 2025. A lot of spots, right?
Hmm.
To call all of that in the ring and have it go smoothly would be quite difficult. So you are going to have to call a lot of it in the back. For me personally, I like the hybrid method though. I like to call a little bit on the front end, a little bit on the back end, and then in the middle, I kind of want to freestyle, right? I want to leave
Yeah.
that open to listen to the audience and have them tell me what they want to see. Do they want a little bit more silliness? Do they want a little bit more entertainment, so to speak?
Yeah.
Or do they want us to get to business and start doing some moves and some spots and some
Yep.
dives and some this, that, and the other? You know what I mean? And I like to listen. And if everything is planned from A to Z, then you don't give yourself that opportunity to listen to the audience and then give them what
Yep.
they want. So I'd like a
You,
little
you gotta.
hybrid personally, but I do understand that in 2025, with all the spots everybody wants to do, then
Mhm.
you are going to get a lot of that pre-match planning that is literally A through Z. I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this and this, and then man, I hope y'all can remember that, because after 22 years in this business, I can't remember anything. So maybe that's another reason why I like the hybrid style a little bit.
Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, though. You've got to be able to read the room and get the feel for the crowd and what direction they're leaning. It kind of reminds me of Hogan and Rock reading the crowd and basically
Yep.
doing the double turn on the fly because
Yep.
that was
You know, and that's kind of a lost art form nowadays. I think people want to force feed the audience their match, when in reality, you are there to entertain those people, right? So if
right.
I always tell a story of a buddy of mine. He was on an event with Jake the Snake Roberts, and
Hmm.
he had asked Jake Roberts to watch his match. And he went out there, with the other guy, and they did everything under the sun, and they were doing every spot and every dive and every cool move, and they thought they had put together a really cool match. And so they come to the back and they asked Jake Roberts, "Hey, what did you think?" And Jake said, "You guys went out there and it was fantastic. You did the everything under the sun, and it was the filet mignon of professional wrestling matches. But that audience, they wanted fish." And it's
Yep.
like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, you force fed them what you thought was a fantastic pro wrestling match, but that's not what the audience thought was a fantastic pro wrestling match. That's not what they wanted on that particular night. And so you didn't get the most out of the match that you could have if you would have just listened to them and given them what they want.
Absolutely. So, and again, I'm kind of reworking this question a bit, coming at this from the perspective now of the trainer, and that is, I mean, I know ultimately the goal is that they would be both, but in terms of your trainees, would you rather have them be great in the ring or great on the mic?
I mean, you're right. You would like both. I think when you first start out on the independent level, it's probably more important to be great in the ring, because, quite frankly, on independent wrestling shows, you're not going to get a lot of mic time. It's not a 3 hour Monday Night Raw. You know what I mean? You
Right.
got typically 7, 8, 9 matches that you're trying to get through. Everybody's getting 10 minutes or so. You're not trying to overstay your welcome, out there in front of that audience. They will get bored. And so if you're not going to get a lot of mic time, then I'd much rather you be great in the ring while you're still developing your skills as a talker. And eventually, once you've proven yourself in the ring, then you will find yourself in storylines. And usually, when you're in a storyline, that is when you'll get an opportunity to cut more promos. So I think I'd prefer you to be great at both, but if you can only be great at one when you first start, let's get you great at your in-ring persona.
Gotcha. So, and this is actually to you as a worker. Do you yourself have a preference between working heel or babyface?
I think it's a lot easier to work as a heel. You can't mess up when you're a heel, right?
Yeah,
If
that's
if
true.
if you go out there and people don't like what you're doing and they boo you, then fantastic.
That's what
That's
you want.
exactly
Yeah.
that was the result that you were looking for. You know, it's much harder to be a baby face because in 2025, you know, these audiences, they want their baby faces to be cool, man. You got to be cool, and it's hard
Yeah.
to be cool. It's hard to be cool. Sometimes you think you're going to be cool, and you go out there and you kind of look like a dummy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you've dug yourself a hole that you're trying to dig yourself out of. So for me personally, I do prefer to work as a heel. There's just something, I don't know if it was from having a younger sister growing up. There's just something about getting people mad at you that I kind of like a little bit. So
Yeah.
I do like working as a heel a little bit better than working as a babyface.
Got you. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree and get what you're saying. You know, really, the NWO kind of made being a heel a little more complicated because you
Yeah,
know
it
the
became
cool heel.
yeah, it flipped the script a little bit. And
It did.
I think the NWO probably actually made it being a babyface more complicated because now you got to be a babyface who has heelish tendencies but never
Yeah.
crosses the line into being a full heel, and that could be difficult.
Yeah. I mean, and then you know you get into the whole concept of the tweener, you know, who's sort of
Yeah,
floating in the middle there, you know. So yeah,
sure.
it's interesting. So, in terms of your in-ring work and your promos, who would you say were some of your influences?
I've always loved Shawn Michaels as a performer, and so subconsciously, I think I channeled a lot of Shawn Michaels in my earlier work, and maybe in my later work too. You know, earlier work was probably babyface Shawn Michaels, and later work was probably the cocky heel Shawn Michaels type stuff. Ric Flair is another guy I've always just loved as a performer. When I was younger, I didn't get it, right, because you're young and you're like, oh, I want to see them do cool flips and cool moves and cool dives. And then I remember training in Chicago when I was 18 years old and really sitting down and studying Ric Flair after I kind of had a little bit of mind for psychology and things like that. And it clicked. And I was like, oh my God, Ric Flair is probably the best performer of all time. The
Hmm.
way he's able to hold an audience in the palm of his hand, whether he's a babyface, whether he's a heel. And so Ric Flair, certainly when I'm a heel, there's a lot of Ric Flair in that. As far as anybody else, there's probably elements of a bunch of different people, but those are my two main inspirations, Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair.
Gotcha. Well, you know, it's funny. The other night when I had Tori Fox on, I was telling her that you know, she needs to, you know, dig around on YouTube and find the I believe it's from 1989, the I Quit match between Ric Flair and Terry Funk.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah, master class in storytelling.
Yep.
That is a beautiful match. I
two
mean,
two of the best right there, and two people who thankfully in my later years I've been able to, or I was able to spend time with Terry Funk when I was a little bit younger, and more recently I've spent time with Ric Flair, and two guys who are just authentically themselves in and out of the ring through and through, and just two great performers as well.
absolutely. So, do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? Uh, um, Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up as a Shawn Michaels fan, WrestleMania 12 against Bret Hart, Iron Man match, that is a very nostalgic moment for me. I wasn't able to watch it live. We were not fortunate enough to have the money for pay-per-views back in the day, but I do remember renting that on VHS tape a couple months later, and watching that, and getting to live vicariously through that moment, and just feeling how special it was for Sean that night. Um, that would probably be my favorite match, and then obviously Sean's match with Ric Flair, where he retires Ric Flair, two of my
Yeah.
favorites. A very emotional match, and
Oh
a
yeah.
match that is a master class at storytelling, which, in my opinion, is what makes professional wrestling great. It's not the moves, it's not the flips, it's not the dives. It is the storytelling and the emotional manipulation, making an audience feel exactly how you want them to feel in any given moment. And that match between Sean and Rick is just top notch in that department.
Oh yeah. I mean I love you, I'm sorry super kick. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
ooh, that was basically like the ending of Old Yeller. I
Yeah,
mean,
it really was. It really was.
yep. So let's see here. So you've been doing this a long time now. Having transitioned into the role that you're in currently, this probably isn't as much of an issue. But I'll ask this anyway: what hurts right now?
Everything. You might get that answer a lot. Everything hurts all the time.
Yeah.
I suffered a serious spinal injury in May of 2007. So quite a while ago at this point. I was only 20 years old. I was about a month away from turning 21, and that injury has just kind of led to more health problems as the years have gone by. Eventually, I needed spinal fusion surgery in my neck. I have my C5 through C7 vertebrae fused together. And, people who have had that injury could tell you once you've injured your neck, the rest of your body kind of follows suit. So, in that same injury, I actually broke a vertebrae in my lower back, which wasn't diagnosed for many, many years. So I have back pain, I have neck pain. Right now, I'm really dealing with a shoulder issue. I'm seeing a physical therapist for a shoulder issue right now. It's actually doing wonders for me. So I probably should have seen him a little bit earlier. I've been dealing with this for almost a year now. My knees, I had knee surgery in high school. I was a football player in high school and ended up getting one of my meniscus pads removed in my right knee. So my right knee gives me troubles. And then just whatever else hurts as soon as I get out of bed in the morning. It can be my ankles, it could be my elbows, it could be pretty much anything. So at this point, after 22 years of professional wrestling, or nearly 22 years, everything hurts all the time.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I know that recently Black and Brave was named one of the WWE's ID schools.
Yep.
And so how did all of that come about? And I guess what has that meant for the school?
Well, I think to answer your second question first, I think it means a lot, right? It shows that WWE, they had sent a representative to our gym, and they did a tour, and they ended up watching a number of our wrestlers perform and put on matches for them, and they were just blown away. They were impressed by the talent. They were impressed by the facility. They were impressed with our teaching methods. And to just have their stamp of approval on something that we've been doing for the past decade, that does mean a lot. It shows that we've been doing things the right way. We're on the right path. We are a top-notch facility, and a facility that if they want to break into this business, they know they can come to us and trust us to give them the proper training, the safe way of doing things. But how it came about, that's actually a longer story. I did a coaching stint at NXT for about a week a number of years ago. I mean, we're talking probably 7 or 8 years ago at this point. I was asked to come down to Florida and do a week-long coaching stint with NXT. And while I was
Mhm.
down there, I ended up getting pulled aside by Triple H on a day where NXT was being filmed. And they had assigned me a couple matches to be a producer for that day. And he was kind of watching me, and I think he liked what I had done. And he pulled me aside to let me know that, hey, in the future, when I, meaning Triple H, when I have a little bit more pull within the company, I would like to shine a spotlight on the independent ranks. And I think your facility is doing things the right way. And I would like to somehow incorporate you into that spotlight on the indies. And what he was essentially doing at that point was laying the groundwork, at least to me, about what WWE ID would be. Triple H has always been a fan of the independents. He came from the independents before he signed with WCW all those years ago, and so I think he does understand that wrestlers from the independent ranks do know what they're doing, and they're passionate about professional wrestling because of everything you have to go through when you're on the independent ranks. And so it took a number of years. Obviously, we had a pandemic in there. We had
Right.
some scandals involving some other people at the very
Oh
top
yeah.
of WWE. But eventually, when he took over and was afforded the opportunity, he came through and made good on his promise to shine a light on the independent ranks, and that's what he's been doing with WWE ID. And I think it's going to continue to grow from here and become even bigger and better than it already is.
Awesome. So, I mean, all things being relative, you're still comparatively a youngish guy,
I
but
wish I
knowing
felt young.
well, yeah, wait until you get in your 50s.
Oh,
Your
I'm
your
sure that's going to be pretty rough for me with everything
your
I've got going on now.
your body starts doing weird stuff in your 50s. I've thrown my back
Right.
out sneezing, just weird stuff. But anyway, at this point in your life, knowing everything that you know now, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I think I would remind my younger self that while it's cool to do cool things, the focus should be on the storytelling, right? And maybe that would have helped me to avoid the injuries that kind of piled up when I was 19, 20, 21 years old. And it might have accelerated my foray into character work, talking about the fashionista. I didn't find that until I was 12 years into my career. I wish I would have found that when I was younger. And I do think I could have grown that character when I was healthier. I could have grown that character into something that was a world traveled type character. And who knows, maybe you could have seen it on your television set if I wouldn't have suffered that neck injury all those years ago. So I think I would have reminded my younger self, or maybe not even reminded, but just informed my younger self that wrestling is about the storytelling, and the moves are a means to an end in that regard. They are not the be all end all of professional wrestling.
Right, right. You a few minutes ago you brought up the topic of the pandemic.
You know?
I'm curious how much of an impact the pandemic had on Black and Brave, and what you guys did to kind of improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Sure, it was definitely a challenge. We ended up delaying one class by a month. We were like, all right, we'll delay it by a month, and then this whole pandemic thing will be over. And then when we realized that it wasn't going to end as quickly as we had hoped, it was like, well, we can either cancel the next 3, 4, 5, 6 classes, or we can try and carry on business as usual, but with some modifications. And that's what we did. We would do temperature checks every time somebody entered the building. Temperature checks. If you had a fever, you were sent home. If you felt sick in any way, we wanted you to take a COVID test, and we actually had a stack of those at the gym at the ready. So if anyone felt sick, you could come to the gym, no charge to you. You grab a test, you take it. If you did pop positive for COVID, which did happen a couple times, we shut
Yeah.
the gym down, and everyone would go home, and everyone would have to take a COVID test, and you'd have to provide a negative sample, a negative test that said you were okay. And once you did that, you were allowed to come back to the gym. So there were challenges. If you weren't in the ring, you were masked up. It was hard to be masked up while you're performing and while you were, practicing in there. So we did the best we could. We were able to get through it. Certainly, modifications were made, and we tried to be as safe as possible. And thankfully, we avoided any major outbreaks. Just a couple cases here and there that we dealt with as best as we could.
Gotcha. So, what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling, specifically in the indies?
I think social media plays a big part nowadays. I myself, not a big fan. Not a big fan of social media. I try not to live my life on social media as much as I did when I was a little bit younger. I don't get too personal on there. In my opinion, nobody really wants to hear all that stuff anyway. So, I have friends for that. I have family members for that. I'll just talk to them. But I think it is absolutely a tool that is needed in independent wrestling promotion. Indie wrestling it's a subset of a subset of a subset. It's a very niche market, right? You
Right.
gotta like wrestling, and then you gotta like wrestling so much that you're gonna search out wrestling beyond WWE and beyond AEW. And then once you find that, now you're trying to find a reliable promotion. There's a lot of good indie wrestling out there, but unfortunately, there's a lot of bad indie wrestling out there as well. You're not guaranteed that your local promotion is going to be, top notch and doing things the right way and giving you some good performers to root for. So, with that being said, if you are an independent wrestler, you are a brand. You are your own brand, and the only way that you can have that you can promote your brand, at least the only cheap way that you can promote your brand, is through social media. You can post on Instagram and Twitter /X/ whatever they're calling it nowadays, and TikTok, and that is the extent of my social media knowledge. I know there's other ones out there, but I don't dabble in that. So if you have the ability to post cool pictures and post highlight videos and promote your upcoming events, places where people can find you, and maybe you're even selling t-shirts and 8x10s or little rubber bracelets or whatever you may be selling. If you're able to do that through your social media accounts, that can help you grow your brand. And when your brand gets bigger, you get more bookings, you get out there, and hopefully get noticed by one of the major companies and then get signed to a contract. So I recognize the need and the importance of social media for a younger wrestler, but I'm also very thankful that for the most part, I don't need to spend hours upon hours every single day cultivating my brand. My brands are Black and Brave. My brands are SCW, the local promotion that I run. But for me personally, as Marek Brave, I don't really need to be doing all that, and I'm appreciative of that fact.
Gotcha. So, if there was one thing that you would advise a trainee that is basically on the waiting list, waiting to come and start a class at Black and Brave, what would be the one thing that you would be advising them to do in preparation?
Well, there's so many things that you should probably be doing, but of the utmost importance, what's going to affect you right away is you do need to be in good physical shape, right? Um, People watch wrestling. You see performers on television, right? You know what they look like. You know what they move like. You got people out there having 20, 25, 30-minute matches on the regular. You have to be in good shape to be able to do that. So if you come to us and you aren't in good physical shape, you're going to have a tough time, and you're certainly going to have a tougher time than those who come to us and they've been inside a gym for the last 6 months to a year preparing for this opportunity. You got to get your cardiovascular shape up. You got to be able to to start and stop and move quickly. And we call that the HIT training, HIIT, high intensity interval training. That's what a wrestling match is. It is HIT training. You got to be able to move in quick bursts for a short amount of time, and then you get a little bit of rest, and then you got to do it all over again multiple times throughout a professional wrestling match. So if you come to us and you're not in the best of shape, that I'm not going to say that will exclude you from being able to graduate the program. It's just going to make it a little bit tougher for you. But don't worry, when you get here, we will focus on fitness, and we will make sure at the end of the 12 weeks you are in good shape before you enter the independent ranks.
Absolutely. So, something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest. And so my previous guest was Tori Fox.
Okay.
And so the question that she posed for you is, of your years as a trainer, what is the most memorable or unusual thing a student has done in your program, whether it be
Oh, wow.
a botched move, a memorable promo, whatever? Is there something that springs to mind?
Oh gosh, there's so many, right? We've been doing this for 10 and a half years at this point. The first one that pops into my head, we have a graduate named Jason. He wrestles under the name JP Finger, which should tell you right away that he's an odd cat, if that was the name that he picked for himself. And we were learning up and overs in the corner, where you grab the ropes and you shoot your legs up and you shoot backwards, and then somebody runs underneath you, right?
Right.
And so he was maybe not in the best physical shape when he arrived. He's gotten himself into phenomenal shape now. But so he struggled with some of the more athletic movements, and I would consider the up and over an athletic movement. And so he, on his first attempt, grabs the ropes, kicks his legs up, gets really high, and unfortunately, he doesn't go directly backwards. He kind of goes off to the side and ends up landing on the top rope with his nether region, we will say. I don't
Oh
know
no.
how family friendly this this
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
is, but
Whatever. I mean,
yeah, he hits his kibbles and bits on the top rope, and it's quite a painful experience, and we're all kind of dying laughing at this point because it's hilarious. And so after a couple minutes, he composes himself and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna go for it again. This time I'm gonna go straight." Goes for it again, off to the side again, directly back onto the kibbles and bits for a second time in a row, which he proceeds to then writhe on the mat for another 4 or 5 minutes before eventually getting it right. But it's one of those things that we still laugh about today, and every single time we teach that up and over in the corner, we talk about the JP Finger story.
yeah, so he JP fingered himself.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Wow. So, since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And actually, tomorrow night, I've got a female wrestler out of the Philadelphia area, Raina Black.
Okay.
She is married to a masked wrestler out there, Eric Black.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be particular to her. But is there a question you would like to pose?
Well, gosh, I guess my question changes based on that information you gave me. I always find it interesting when there is a married couple in independent wrestling, because I understand this business can put a strain on relationships. So I guess my question to her would be, has there been a time where independent wrestling, professional wrestling, has put a strain on the relationship that she has with her husband, and what they did to move past that situation, and what advice she would give to people entering into the independent wrestling world, the professional wrestling world, who may be in a relationship or may be married themselves?
Oh, that is a really good question. How would you answer that?
I do think this business is tough on relationships. I mean, there are many ways it could be tough on relationships, right? You know, you as an independent wrestler, if you're trying to maximize your time in a ring, you're going to be booked every single weekend. And if your significant other isn't in the business, unlike Reina, that person's going to be left at home. They're going to be sitting at home. Maybe you have kids at home. Maybe you have dogs, or maybe you have family that are, you know, they're having anniversaries and birthdays and weddings. And if you're committed to making it in the professional wrestling world, you're going to be missing out on those events, which can put a strain on your relationship. And so you need to be comfortable and secure in your relationship, because on top of that, you're obviously going to have the jealousy. You know, you get in the wrestling world, and the guys and the girls are wearing small amounts of clothing, and everybody's in great shape, and everybody's exuding, I don't even know how to put it, machismo, and then the
Yeah.
female equivalent of that, sexiness, whatever it may be. Um, and that's going to put a strain on a relationship if you're with somebody who is of the jealous type. And I don't even blame someone for being jealous in that situation, because it is tough. You know, you're going to be in locker rooms with these people, in cars with these people, sharing close, intimate moments with these people. And I think you need to find someone who's comfortable not just with you doing that, but is comfortable with themselves, to know that I'm enough. I provide a lot to this relationship, and just because my significant other is going out on the road and being away from home for a couple days at a time doesn't mean that they're going to be doing anything wrong, so to speak. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
Like I know that what I bring to the table is good enough for my partner, and as long as you can stay confident in yourself and not let those insecurities come to the forefront, I think that relationships can withstand the pressures of the professional wrestling world. But oftentimes you don't get that, and that's when you do see, a lot of these relationships fall apart, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So we're pretty much at the end of things. So do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you'd like to give some hype to?
Oh, we got a million of them. That's all we're doing, is putting on wrestling shows around here. So March 8th, we are partnering with the QC Storm minor league hockey team for an event at Vibrant Arena in Moline, Illinois. Our event will take place directly after the hockey game is over, and we actually have AEW superstar and former WWE superstar Shelton Benjamin in for that one. So that one should be
Nice.
a fun time. And what's cool about that is if you buy a ticket to the hockey game, you get into the wrestling event for free,
Oh,
which is
that's
really
cool.
nice. Following
Yeah.
that, March 22nd, we will be at Wildwood Smokehouse and Saloon in Iowa City, Iowa, putting on an event. And then April 5th, we have our version of WrestleMania. We call that Epic. That's SCW Pros Epic, and that will be on April 5th at the Bluegrass Community Center in Bluegrass, Iowa, and that'll be a really fun one. So,
Nice. Nice. Well, Marek, I want to thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun. I had a feeling it was going to be. And for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays and such on the web, thank you for that. If you like what we've got going here, do the old like, comment, share, and subscribe. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern with Reina Black. And then on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I've got episode 90 with Vira Lestrange, who is another female wrestler. And we've got a bunch more episodes coming down the pike. So be paying attention to my social media, and more stuff will be announced shortly. And in the meantime, be good to each other, love each other, and keep throwing down.